Hi guys, so I tried to do the frat boy skit like, yo bro, I filmed that like 7 times, I couldn't do it today, I'm so sick right now. Anyways, I know this has nothing to do with the topic of the video, and you can probably skip past this, but yeah, I'm feeling pretty shitty, so put in the comments below, and say some things to cheer me up. But by the time this video is uploaded, I'm probably already well, so it's good. But anyways, have you encountered frat boys? Yo, bro, come to Stevens. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights. For these encounters, you've had them, I know. Sexually assaulted in a bathroom by a frat guy. Posting as a throwaway account because most of my friends use Reddit and know my account, and this is embarrassing. I was rushing for a frat back in university. I attended there a few of their rush events. Everyone was a dick, but I didn't mind because I just wanted to party and have fun. One of the upperclassmen was a real dick though, so generally, I'm fine with slapping a guy's ass, cock-knocking someone, purple nurple, etc. Joking bromance, I'm good for. But this guy was a complete creep. 3 guys from the frat came to my dorm at 2 AM in the morning and made me do push-ups in the hallways. I was annoyed that they had come to my room just to embarrass me. But nothing creeped me out until the guy shoved his dick on my face and started to hump my face. It took me like 2 seconds to get out of the push-up position, but for the first time as a male, I felt violated. They all laughed and left eventually. Things were okay for the next 2 weeks until I met the same guy in my dorm bathroom. He lived on the opposite side of campus, but he was taking a leak in my dorm bathroom. It didn't really hit me though until afterwards. I walked by him and took a leak. He came into my stall and kicked me forward. I never closed my stall doors. Before I could turn around, he gave me a 1,000 years of death, fingers up a guy's butt as a joke, through my shorts. I'm normally fine with this as long as I get revenge and it's a friend, but given the situation and person, I was friggin' horrified. And the worst part was that he didn't stop. He shoved it up for a good 4 seconds, and I was propped against the wall, trying to keep my balance and in utter shock that I couldn't move away. I eventually yelled, "Fuck off!" and threw a punch at him, but I hit his shoulder instead. He just stared at me and walked in closer. He's a lot bigger than me too. He puffed his chest and hovered over me, then got his hands and flicked my nuts. He left with the biggest smile I've ever seen. I leaned against the stall door for about 5 minutes, crying. My take on frats. I know that not all frats are bad, but this completely ruined my idea and image of a frat. Terrorized for 2 hours. This happened when I was in college. I lived in Isla Vista, the student community at UCSB, notorious for being a party school. It fully lived up to its reputation. I liked to party, but holy shit, these people were off the wall. As such, there were a lot of people who put themselves in dangerous situations, drinking to excess, not being careful, not locking doors, etc. It had a very isolated and insular vibe, and anyone who was hanging around who wasn't college-aged immediately looked out of place and strange. One night, after having a few drinks, I came home to my small house where I lived with 2 other girls, probably around 2:30 AM. We were all serious students. I was probably the least serious actually, and when we partied, it wasn't your typical UCSB mega rager, more like a small get-together with friends. We would often have a few people spend the night, sleep on our furniture or in our beds, as the case may be. That night, my roommate had had a few people over who I didn't know, and I saw when I returned home that one of them had opted to sleep on the couch from the shadow that I saw there. But as I was passing the couch to enter my bedroom, I noticed that the figure was laying very stiff. He just had this weird energy to him. He was lying down, but it was like he was putting all of his energy into laying as still and as rigid as possible. I paused, and the guy quickly jerked his head to face me without moving his limbs so quickly that it startled me. I could see his wide open eyes glinting in the darkness. Figuring that I'd startled him or that he was drunk or maybe on some kind of stimulants and unable to sleep, I just hurried past into my bedroom and locked the door. The dude made me nervous and I wasn't taking any chances. I fell asleep. At 4:30 a.m., I woke up. There was a strange sound at the door, almost like somebody was drumming their fingers against the wood very quietly. I lay still and listened. There were more quiet sounds, like someone scratching the door with their fingers, which got louder and louder, until it was clear that he was using both hands and scratching as fast and as hard as possible. It created an extremely loud and intimidating sound that filled me with fear. I got my cell phone and texted my roommate because I was afraid to make a sound. "Your friend is freaking me out. Is he coked out? Can you talk to him? He's banging and scratching on my door." She didn't text me back, probably because she was asleep. I texted my other roommate to the same effect, covering all my bases. Keep in mind that the scratching has been going on at this point for a couple minutes. I have no idea how he could have sustained it like that. Scratching a wooden door with your fingernails can't feel good. He also grabbed at the knob and jiggled it super forcefully. Because neither of them answered, I decided to call and really wake them up, though I was scared to make a sound. I know it sounds stupid, but there was something seriously horrifying about being teased like this through the door. I knew that he was trying to terrify me. I felt like a little kid, but I could tell this guy was fucked up or something, and maybe the police needed to be called. I wanted to loop my roommates in, since it was one of their friends. The scratching stopped abruptly, and I called my roommate, who answered sleepily. "Yo, your friend is messed up. Can you deal with it? Do we need to call the cops? He's seriously scaring me, and he's scratching at my door, man. Really freaking weird." She didn't say anything for several seconds, and when she did speak, her voice had no sleepiness in it at all. "What friend?" she said. "That freaking guy that was sleeping on the couch," I said. She was quiet again. "We didn't have any guys over," she said. "Call the police." My adrenaline surged, and I told her to please lock the bedroom door as quickly as possible. I realized that I hadn't heard scratching in a while, and I had no idea where the dude had gone. Suddenly, I heard a loud banging in the other end of the house, where my roommates, Lauren and Monica, shared a bedroom. The bangs were followed by the sound of them screaming in fear. I quickly dialed the police as this maniac proceeded to bang against the luckily locked bedroom door of my two roommates as they screamed. The heaviness of the blows left no doubt that he was trying to break the door down. I told the 911 operator the situation, and she dispatched 2 squad cars. The police in Isla Vista are generally used to peeling drunks off the sidewalk and breaking up brawling frat bros. This was really serious and strange, and I think the dispatcher got the sense from my tone how terrified I was, and she stayed on the phone with me. At one point, the banging stopped, and everything was quiet for a while. I talked with the dispatcher and suddenly looked down to see that this guy had slipped his fingers through the 1-inch gap between my door and the floor and was just waggling them around, making this weird growling sound. I screamed and backed away, which is my biggest regret about the situation, since when I look back at it, it would have been so awesome to just stomp the shit out of those fingers and hear the guy howl in pain. When the cops rolled up, I heard running and the sound of our sliding glass door opening and closing, and then he was gone. The cops never caught him. He had broken in through our side door by jimmying the lock somehow. My door was covered in what turned out to be huge gouges he had made with a pair of scissors, which he discarded on the ground before he left. What terrifies me the most about this was that I walked right past him. I looked him right in the face. I realized now that he was not trying to sleep or on drugs, but was lying so stiff like that because he was hiding. He probably heard me open the door and freaked out because he hadn't realized there was another girl living there, and tried to blend into the couch in the darkness. Fraternity brother becomes obsessed. This is a long post that details several incidents over the better part of a year. It started during my sophomore year of college, and my first semester living on campus. I commuted about 25 minutes from home my freshman year, and after taking a break from school during fall of sophomore year, I realized I wanted to go back and get the full experience. My roommate was in a fraternity, and as soon as we met, he started asking me to hang out with them. I figured it couldn't hurt, and after they offered me a bid, I reluctantly joined. I figured if I took the bid, I could always leave, but if I declined, I'd regret not trying it out and seeing what it was like. Luckily, most of the guys I joined there were the same way. The frat was dying off and needed numbers, so they took in anyone they could get, and most of us weren't too invested in it. As we go along the pledge process, big/little assignments starts to approach. For those who don't know, this is one of the weirder traditions and rituals in Greek life. Every pledge gets assigned a big brother, and is taken into one of the chapter's many family lineages. Sorority girls obsess over this kind of thing a lot more, but frats still do it too. The way pairs are determined is through each pledge handing in a list of their top 3 preferred brothers, and each brother handing in a list of their top 3 preferred pledges. Then, pairs are made in a way that makes everyone as satisfied as possible. I copped out and put 2 guys as number 1. Like I said, this frat was just glad to have us along, so a lot of the pledge process was about making us happy and keeping us around rather than humbling us. The reason I put 2 was that there was one brother who I thought would be a good fit for me, and another brother who I could tell really took to me, but I didn't think he'd be a good fit. The one I wanted was older and had seniority, so I figured he'd get me. But nope, the other guy, John, did. I didn't take it too seriously anyways, so I was fine with this. After that, John always wanted to hang out. Actually, even leading up to the big little decision, he was starting to invite me to drink at his dorm a lot. But now we started to be together all the time, and I started seeing less and less of my pledge bros. I never quite felt fully comfortable around John. There were guys I hung out with a lot less who I felt a lot more natural around, but I could tell he liked hanging out, and I never saw a reason to blow him off. He would always pressure me to drink a lot, but I didn't think it was too weird because I sometimes did that to my friends who were lighter drinkers. But the difference was, I wasn't a light drinker. He would just encourage me to get wasted. One night, when we were hanging out, he convinced me to drink more than I should have, and I ended up passing out on his couch with my shoes on. A lot of you know it's pretty common in college to write on someone who passes out with their shoes on, and when I woke up in the morning, I wasn't surprised to see Sharpie on me. The problem was, it wasn't just a couple drawings on my face. He lifted my shirt and written all over my stomach, chest, arms, and even on my legs up to, or maybe even past where my shorts stopped. And he was the only person there, so it's not like he was doing it for other people's entertainment. Another night, he brought me to a small party at the on-campus apartment of a girl he'd been friends with for a few years, who was obviously interested in me. After everyone left the party, she wanted me to stay, and I had a pretty good idea of what was gonna happen then. But it didn't go the way I planned. John stayed too, and she started making out with the both of us in her kitchen. I saw where it was going, and I know a lot of other guys would be cool with the situation, but I wasn't. So I decided to leave, and I figured John would have no reason to care if I left. He'd have her to himself, but he was obviously disappointed and tried really hard to get me to stay. Pretty soon, housing registration was about to start. John asked me what my plans were, and I told him I was planning on living with a few guys I was pledging with. We'd had these plans for a while. I could tell he wasn't happy about it. He told me we were never gonna get put in one of the apartment-style dorms unless we had an older student, him, registering in our group, and that I should kick someone else out of the group so we wouldn't get stuck in a smaller dorm. I told him I just couldn't do that. On registration day, my buddy calls me and says, "Hey, John just called and said you're not living with us next year. He says you're registering with him." The registration system at my school was hectic, and he was obviously trying to cause last-minute confusion to make sure I didn't live with them. His plans didn't work, but we screwed up on our own, and we're all left in apartments with people we didn't know. I ended up switching into an open spot in an apartment with a few other brothers, and sure enough, John found out and made his way there. Summer came, and I didn't give much thought to the upcoming semester, but it did cross my mind more and more as time went on. I had a bad feeling about living with this kid. He actually came to my state to visit about halfway through the summer. He stayed at my house, and his attitude was pretty strange for the entire 3 days. My mom tried to make conversation with him, and he didn't really respond at all. He would usually just look her up and down in a really odd and vaguely threatening way, and then give one-word answers to anything she was saying. One night during his visit, we met up with one of our buddies who lived nearby and was in the same frat house as us. John actually pledged with his kid, and I guess he stayed at his house the previous summer when he visited. When we met up, our buddy didn't drink. I had a few beers and John got pretty drunk. We all went to Walmart and walked around because we couldn't find much else to do, and at one point, when we were all joking around, John reared back and punched the back of my head pretty hard out of nowhere. He wasn't drunk enough to be this obnoxious without knowing what he was doing, but I noticed that he had a habit of using alcohol as an excuse to be aggressive with people. I didn't want to escalate the situation in the middle of Walmart, but our friend asked him why he did that, and he said that I didn't love him as a big enough. At this point, I knew something was wrong with this kid, and I didn't want to live with him. But everyone else in the apartment was my friend, and I figured it was better than moving somewhere else. I was wrong. And this is where things get bad. All 6 of us moved in, and it was 2 guys to a room. Of course, John takes the room I'm in. During the first few days back, he kept up this habit of hitting me in the back of the head when he was drinking, and then pretending he didn't know what he was doing. But after a second or third time, I got in his face and told him to stop. One of the first nights after everyone was officially moved in and settled, but before classes started, we decided to buy a 30 rag and drink as a group to break in the new place. We were all joking around, and I made a simple joke that pissed him off. I don't remember the joke, but it wasn't even at his expense. He told me not to say it again, but I said it again because I was tired of him trying to tell me what to do. That's when he punched me in the jaw. I punched him back, and it ended up turning into a fight. He started losing, and that was when he made the calculated move of grabbing my head, pushing it down, and punching the same spot he'd hit me a few times before. I'll admit, at this point I was losing, and I was scared I was gonna lose consciousness. Luckily, my roommates broke it off. They put us in separate rooms, but he still wanted to talk to me. The last thing I wanted to do was talk to this kid, so I went for a walk around campus. At this point, it was about 3 a.m. Well, he decided to follow me around campus. I turned around and told him to go back to the apartment, and he did. I went to the farthest point on campus from our apartment, called my mom and told her she had to get me out of there, and I couldn't sleep in the same room with John. He called me about 3 or 4 times after I hung up with her, and I finally answered. He asked me where I was, and I told him I didn't want to talk. He said he didn't want to talk, he just wanted to make sure I was alright. I knew I had a ride coming anyways, so I gave him and told him where I was. I didn't want him to keep calling me or look for me and find me without me knowing about it first. Within 10 minutes he was there. He sat down on my left side. We were mostly silent, but suddenly, he reached around my back to my right pocket and unclipped my pocket knife. At this point, He started alternating between fake laughing and fake crying, telling me he just wanted to be the best big possible, and worst of all, slicing himself with my knife. Yep, one on the leg and one on the arm, blood dripping from both. I knew I was bigger and probably stronger than him, but he was crazier and the only one with a weapon. So I found myself scared shitless of another person and for my life. For pretty much the first time in my life, I already knew he was crazy. But this is when I knew he was a bona fide sociopath. The lack of any real remorse for what he just did at the apartment, combined with a desperate acting job, made me realize he was dangerous. I told him I had a ride coming, and he raised a knife and said that whoever was taking me home was giving him a lift back to the other side of campus. My mom rolls up, and I jumped into the passenger seat and told her to speed off. He came at the car, but we made it off campus. I stayed home for a week and drove to school, but I did a lot of thinking about what to do next. I knew this kid was a nutjob. I knew he had some weird obsession with me, and I knew he had to be stopped. But he was a good student with a good reputation, and so far the worst incident had no witnesses. My main options were to let him win and drive to school for the rest of the semester, or pretend I forgave him, move back in, and expose him when I got the chance. I chose the second option. When I came back, he gave me an insincere apology, while trying to look like he was about to break down in tears, and told me the week I was gone was really hard for him. I don't think he knew how strange that seemed. Throughout the rest of the semester, several disturbing incidences occurred. This is already pretty long, so I'll share the worst of it. First off, he followed me everywhere, in and out of our room, and whenever I tried to leave the apartment, he would stay up until I went to sleep, and he would go to sleep or go to sleep at the same time. One night, I decided to test when 4 or 5 of us who lived in the apartment were watching a movie. I abruptly left, went into the bedroom, changed into clothes I normally sleep in. Even though he seemed pretty into the movie, he followed me and started changing and getting ready for bed when he saw me changing. But instead of going to bed, I went back out into the living room and started watching the movie again. He waited in the bedroom for me to come back, and sure enough, after about 10 minutes he was back out watching the movie with us. He'd followed me around parties too, to the point where my pledge brothers would let me know when they were ready to leave, and we'd all sneak out together so he couldn't follow us. Maybe the most disturbing thing that happened was when I noticed that the photo count on my iPhone was way lower than it used to be. When I looked through my pictures, I noticed that a lot of pictures were gone. None of them were pictures I saved from the internet, or pictures I took when I was hiking or anything like that. They were all pictures that had my other friends in them. I don't know when this happened or how it happened, but I had previously noticed him eyeing my phone when I put in my passcode. One night, when a party was ending, a few of us stayed around and hung out. I spent most of the semester relatively sober in case he'd try anything, but that night I got pretty hammered. I don't know what prompted it. Out of nowhere, he grabbed me by the throat and jacked me against the wall. Looking in his eyes, I saw that same glaze I did during the knife incident. I pushed him off and he walked out. My friends and I went to the late-night food spot on campus and were waiting in line when he found us. He pulled me aside, grabbed my hand, and sliced my thumb open with a knife. Then he cut his own thumb and pressed our thumbs together like some sort of forced blood brother ritual in a bad movie, and then acted like nothing happened. Right then, I got a call from one of the brothers who lived in our main party spots, saying he saw John choking me and asked what was going on. I went back to their place and they saw blood pouring down my hand. These were pretty much the top 2 dogs in the frat, the president and vice presidents, and I never saw them scared like this. They told me I had to sleep at their place that night, and they weren't gonna let me leave until the next day. That night, John called me about 25 times, left threatening messages, and told me he was gonna fuck up the apartment if I didn't come back that night. The next morning, I walked in to find a giant hole punched in the wall above my bed. Finally, towards the end of the semester, I decided to finally bring all of this up to the before-mentioned mutual friend from the summer. He lived in the apartment with us, but was never really home and had no idea what was going on. Keep in mind, this kid was really close with John before, and it was before I met either one of them, so I didn't know how he'd react once I told him. But as I told him the story, he looked more scared than I was. When I finished, he told me John had shown the same pattern with him over the last couple of years, and it only got worse and worse, which is why he was glad John decided to room with me, and also why he was never in the apartment. When our conversation was winding down, John knocked on the door. When we let him in, he looked genuinely concerned for the first time since I met him. I don't know if he just read the looks on our faces or if he was listening in the whole time. After that, we went out to a party. John followed us around the whole time and didn't let either one of us out of his sight, so we snuck out early and went back to the apartment to keep talking about what was going on. After about 10 minutes, John busted in the room and went after our friend. He pinned him down on a bed, got on top of him, and started strangling him. Before any real damage was done, I pulled him off, went to our campus police, and he was immediately detained and kicked out of the school. He called me unexpectedly from a new number about 4 months later to apologize, but ended up just rattling off excuses for a few minutes. I didn't know what to say, so I hung up. That's it. It's harder for me to trust people I meet now, and sometimes I come up with pretty frigged up theories about people if they seem a little off or a little too friendly. Other than that, I came out relatively unscathed.